When a smug teacher mocked the school's quiet black janitor by daring him to solve a complex calculus equation on the board, everyone laughed until he picked up the chalk. What happened next shattered stereotypes, exposed hidden brilliance, and changed the entire school forever. It was a crisp Monday morning at Roosevelt High School, the kind of school that prided itself on academic excellence and sharp blazers with gold-stitched logos. The walls were decorated with banners from Ivy League schools, the hallways polished to a fine gleam, and the classrooms filled with students already groomed for leadership. But beneath the surface of ambition and awards, subtle biases lingered like dust in corners. No one bothered to clean. At the edge of the main hallway stood a quiet figure, Mr. Elijah Brooks, the school's janitor, mid-50s, soft-spoken, with salt and pepper hair and calm eyes. He moved through the halls with a mop in one hand and a distant look that suggested a world far beyond these walls. Most students passed him without a second glance. Some nodded politely. A few seniors raised better greeted him warmly, but among the staff, Elijah was invisible, except to Mr. Carter. Carter was the youngest math teacher on staff. Late 20s, flashy, full of overconfidence and sarcasm. He was the sort of person who liked to hear himself talk. Always wearing a crisp vest and a smug smile, he treated the classroom like a stage and his students like an audience. It wasn't uncommon for him to crack a joke at someone's expense, as long as it drew a laugh. And this morning, he was feeling particularly theatrical inside room 204. His AP Calculus class was reviewing advanced concepts of multivariable derivatives. The air buzzed with nervous energy as Carter scribbled an especially brutal equation on the whiteboard, something that looked like it belonged in a NASA control room. He turned back to the class. He spotted movement outside the door. Elijah had just finished mopping the hallway and was quietly wheeling his cart past the room. Carter's eyes lit up. A joke formed instantly. "Hey, Mr. Brooks," he called out loudly. The class turned. Some students exchanged glances, unsure of what he was doing. Elijah paused, surprised. "Yes, sir," he said politely, peering inside. Carter grinned. "We've hit a snag in here. This problem's a monster. You look like a smart guy to give it a shot." Laughter rippled through the room. A few students chuckled. One or two looked uncomfortable. Elijah hesitated at the doorway, his hand resting on the mop handle. "I doubt I'm qualified," he said gently, clearly aware of the joke being played at his expense. But Carter wasn't done. "Oh, come on. It's just numbers," he said mockingly. "Aren't we always told math is universal?" Now the class was really laughing. A few students clapped. The ones who stayed quiet looked down at their desks. Elijah looked at the board. The equation sprawled across 3 lines. Partial derivatives, chain rules, and second-order variables danced in neatly drawn symbols. He stepped forward slowly. "You insist," he said, walking into the room and setting his mop aside. The room hushed. Elijah picked up a piece of chalk. He stood in front of the board for a moment, hands behind his back like a professor considering his next move. Then, without a word, he began to write. At first, no one moved. Then the class collectively leaned in. His handwriting was elegant, precise, confident. Every stroke had intention. He tackled the partial derivatives with ease, flowing through the steps without hesitation. The board filled with clean lines, the complicated mess untangling before their eyes. A pin could have dropped. Phones were forgotten. Laughter silenced. Even Carter had stopped smirking. After about 3 minutes, Elijah stepped back, set the chalk down, and turned to the class. "Check your work," he said softly, and then he walked out. The room stayed frozen for a beat longer. Carter blinked, trying to mask the growing red in his cheeks. He turned to the board, trying to find a flaw. There wasn't one. A student in the front, Relina Park, top of the class, whispered, That's correct. Every step. I think he even simplified a part I didn't notice." Carter said nothing. The bell rang. Students filed out in stunned silence, whispering to each other as they left. But the story was already growing legs. By lunch, the school buzzed like a shaken beehive. The phrase, "Did you hear about the janitor?" was everywhere, at lockers, in the cafeteria, in whispered texts and group chats. Some students swore they saw the whole thing. Others only heard secondhand, but the tale was the same. Elijah Brooks, the janitor no one really noticed, had just done something most of the senior class couldn't. That afternoon, Elijah continued his duties like nothing happened. He swept the stairwell, emptied trash bins, and restocked paper towels in the science wing. He didn't seem bothered by the looks. Students now gave him half in awe, half in disbelief. Meanwhile, Carter was not taking it so gracefully. He locked his door during his planning period and sat fuming behind his desk. How had this happened? Who the hell was this janitor? A fluke? Dumb luck? A trick? Surely he couldn't really have known that material. He scrolled on his computer, searching the school directory for Elijah's profile, but there was barely anything, just facilities, staff, no picture, no background. That made him more nervous. In the teacher's lounge, whispers had already begun. Ms. Diaz from chemistry asked Mr. Trent from history, "Did you hear what happened in room 204? Mr. Trent nodded. "Kid told me it was like watching Good Will Hunting in real life." Who is that guy? No idea. But Carter looked like he swallowed a lemon when I saw him after. By the end of the day, Principal Graham had heard about it. He called Carter into his office and asked him what happened. Just a misunderstanding, Carter lied. The janitor happened to recognize a problem, probably saw something similar online. Principal Graham raised an eyebrow. Carter, I used to teach calculus at the college level. That equation wasn't from a textbook. Carter didn't respond. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the school and the halls emptied, Elijah finished mopping the last wing and stepped into the janitor's closet. He hung up his keys, wiped his hands, and pulled out a weathered paperback. From his bag, A Mathematician's Apology by G.H. Hardy. He read quietly for a while. No fanfare, no ego juts, numbers, just peace. The next morning, Roosevelt High School felt like a different building. Students arrived early, teachers peeked out of classrooms more often, and every hallway conversation seemed to orbit around the same name, Mr. Elijah Brooks. Most students had never even learned his name before. He was just the janitor. But now he was a legend, walking among them. The man who solved a college-level calculus equation in front of an entire AP class without batting an eye. There were memes already circulating through social media, images of Elijah with chalk in hand, others with the realest math teacher on campus splashed across them. Still, Elijah remained his usual self. He arrived at 6:30 a.m., clocked in without comment, and began his routine like always, checking bathroom supplies, unlocking the gym, and humming quietly as he swept through the East Wing. In room 2, Mr. Carter arrived a bit later than usual, his usual swagger dampened by the previous day's embarrassment. He didn't say much to his students, choosing instead to dive into lecture without making eye contact. His ego had taken a hit, and he was hoping the story would fade, but it wouldn't. Not with Lena Park on the case. Lena was a senior, one of the brightest minds at Roosevelt, valedictorian, frontrunner, editor-in-chief of the school paper, and more than anything obsessed with uncovering truth. To her, Elijah's mysterious moment wasn't just a cool story, it was a puzzle begging to be solved. That afternoon, she approached him. He was polishing the front windows when she stopped beside him. Mr. Brooks, he turned, smiling politely. Yes, young lady, I just wanted to say what you did yesterday was amazing. Everyone's talking about it. Elijah smiled, brushing it off. Oh, that. Just something I remembered. But that was college-level mathematics, she pressed. Where did you learn to do that? Read a lot, he said, eyes twinkling. Lena wasn't satisfied. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions? For the school paper? Elijah paused, then chuckled. I'm not sure I'm interesting enough for that. I think you might be the most interesting person in the whole building, she said sincerely. He gave her a long look, then nodded. All right, just don't expect anything flashy. Later that week, Lena sat cross-legged on the floor of her room, laptop open, notes scattered around her. She'd spent the last 3 days researching everything she could about Elijah Brooks, but finding details wasn't easy. His employment records were minimal. He'd been working at Roosevelt for the past 7 years. Always punctual, always quiet. No complaints, no accolades. Just a steady presence. No social media. No interviews. Nothing flashy. But then she dug deeper, using an old university archive. She searched academic databases for any trace of his name, and that's when she found it. Elijah D. Brooks, MIT Mathematics Department. Class of 1995. Published multiple research papers on nonlinear systems, chaos theory, and predictive modeling. One of his papers, Application of Limit Cycles in Biological Networks, had been cited over 200 times. Lena sat back, stunned. He wasn't just smart, he was a genius. The next day, she met with Elijah again during lunch. She handed him a printed copy of one of his old academic papers. You were at MIT? Elijah's expression darkened for a moment. He looked at the paper, then at Lena. Yes, he said quietly. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? He smiled sadly. Because not every story ends the way it starts. And so he told her the truth. He had been a rising star. Full scholarship to MIT, papers published by age 24, offers from Stanford and Caltech. The future was wide open. But then tragedy struck. His younger brother, Marcus, died in a car accident during Elijah's final year of grad school. Their parents had passed years earlier, was just the two of them. The loss gutted him. I couldn't think, couldn't write, couldn't care about formulas when I couldn't even get out of bed. Elijah explained. I left the program, never went back. He drifted for a while, worked odd jobs, eventually took a position at Roosevelt to be near his late brother's old neighborhood. Cleaning brought a kind of peace, a rhythm. Lena was silent for a long time. You could still be teaching, she said. Elijah smiled. Maybe, but sometimes being invisible is easier. People leave you alone when they think they already know who you are. Monday morning school paper hits desks. The Mind Behind the Mop. A Hidden Genius Walks Our Halls by Lena Park. The front page featured a candid photo of Elijah in his overalls, chalk in hand, standing next to the whiteboard. The article told his story, his brilliance, his tragedy, and the quiet grace with which he'd rebuilt a life most had ignored. Students devoured it. Some teachers were moved to tears. Even the most cynical seniors paused as they read about the man they'd passed 100 times without a second thought. Elijah became more than a story. He became a symbol. Students began to greet him in the halls. They asked him math questions between classes. Some sat near his mop bucket just to talk. One even brought him coffee and a copy of the New Yorker. But not everyone was thrilled. Mr. Carter, nursing his bruised ego, read the article with clenched teeth. The headline felt like a slap. He began pushing a new narrative that Elijah had set him up, or that Lena had exaggerated the story for clout. He told colleagues it was student gossip and editorial fluff, but no one believed him. When Lena presented copies of Elijah's peer-reviewed papers, scanned and dated, with university letterhead, any doubt crumbled. Even the school's vice principal approached Elijah after assembly. "You should be teaching," she said. "I'm fine where I am," Elijah replied, with his signature warmth. The speech at Principal Graham's request. Elijah agreed reluctantly to speak to the senior class during a Friday assembly. He stood at the front of the auditorium, microphone in hand, uniform unchanged, a mop leaning gently against the stage wall. The lights dimmed, the chatter quieted, and then he spoke. "I never thought I'd be standing here," he began. "Truth be told, I never thought any of you would know my name." He shared his story not for praise, but for purpose. He spoke about grief, about wasted potential, about the comfort of solitude. But more than that, he spoke about the danger of assumptions. "You judged me," he said, "not with anger, but with clarity. Not because you're cruel, because you were taught to look at a man's role and believe that's all he is." The students sat still, faces fixed. "And you're not alone. I judged myself too. I let myself disappear because I thought it was easier. But what happened last week reminded me maybe it's time to be seen." Applause didn't erupt. It rolled forward like a rising tide. One student stood, then another. Then the entire auditorium rose to their feet. It wasn't just a standing ovation, it was an apology, a thank you, and a promise to do better. That evening, Lena sat at her desk, scrolling through emails from schools and magazines requesting permission to reprint her article. She smiled, but it wasn't about the attention, that it was about the impact. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the school, Elijah placed his mop back in the closet, leaned against the wall, and exhaled. For the first time in years, he felt seen. The Monday following Elijah's speech felt like the dawn of a new era at Roosevelt. High, gone was the invisible janitor that students once passed without a glance. In his place stood a man who now represented possibility, intellect, humility, and quiet strength. Students smiled when they saw him, many offering greetings, some even carrying their empty snack wrappers just to have an excuse to talk to him. Elijah responded with kindness, as always, but remained grounded. Fame had never been his aim. In fact, the attention made him slightly uncomfortable still. He couldn't ignore how the energy in the school had changed. Not all of it was positive. However, behind closed doors, Mr. Carter brooded. He watched his credibility wither by the day. The faculty began to speak Elijah's name with reverence. Parents praised the administration for highlighting diversity and excellence. Some students started citing Elijah's example in college essays, and Lena's article had been picked up by a regional education blog, now circulating well beyond the school's walls. To Carter, it was unbearable. His own classroom presence now felt smaller, diminished, mocked even. And so, one afternoon, he snapped. He cornered Elijah near the faculty lounge, faking a friendly tone. "Hey, Mr. Brooks, I've been thinking. You clearly know your stuff. How about we give the students something special?" Elijah paused, skeptical. "What did you have in mind?" "A little math showdown. You versus me. A fun, friendly duel. During assembly. You know, for entertainment." Elijah blinked. "You want a math contest?" Carter smirked. "You can back out, of course. I understand if it's not your thing." The challenge was clear. It wasn't about math, it was about ego. Carter wanted to reclaim dominance in front of the very crowd that had turned on him. Elijah could have declined, but something in him stirred. Not anger, not pride. Something more powerful, a desire to end the whispering war once and for all. To set an example, especially for the students who had begun to find strength in his presence. "I'll do it," Elijah said softly, "but only if the questions come from the students." Carter hesitated. "Fine." Word spreads quickly by Wednesday. The school was buzzing again. Flyers went up. Math showdown. Mr. Carter versus Mr. Brooks. This Friday, a battle of minds at the assembly. Some teachers were uneasy. The principal reluctantly approved it, hoping the event would settle the rising tension. Lena tried to talk Elijah out of it. "You don't have to prove anything," she said. "I'm not doing it to prove," Elijah replied. "I'm doing it to close the book." Friday, the showdown. The gym was packed. Bleachers full, phones raised, whispers flying. Students had submitted advanced math problems all week. 3 were chosen each, progressively harder. Elijah walked in quietly, wearing his usual janitor's uniform. No theatrics, just a clipboard, a pencil, and a calm gaze. Carter arrived in a custom blazer, sleeves rolled up, marker in hand. Principal stood at center court. "We're here today to celebrate learning in all its forms. Our 2 participants will solve 3 student-submitted problems on these boards. No calculators, just brilliance. Problem 1. An integral calculus equation. Carter dove in fast, scribbling confidently. Elijah took his time, studying first, then writing methodically. They both finished at the same time. Answer correct. Round 1 tie. Problem 2. A vector field. Question involving 3D space modeling. This time, Carter stumbled. He reversed the sign midway through. Elijah caught it and finished 2 minutes later with a perfect answer. Students clapped softly at first, then louder. Carter's face tensed. Problem 3. A proof-based problem involving infinite series convergence. Brutally hard. Carter began. Aggressive again, but his steps were messy, equations overlapping. He was trying too hard to impress. Elijah paused before even touching his marker. He studied the series, then began to simplify, breaking the steps into pieces that made even the teachers in the front row sit up straighter. In 7 minutes, he completed the proof, then turned the board around with one simple phrase written below the answer: mathematics is the pursuit of truth, not pride. The gym erupted. Cheers, applause, phones flashing. Not just for the wind, but for the message. Carter didn't finish the problem. He quietly stepped away, face burning, and left the gym before the crowd dispersed. After the assembly, the principal approached Elijah. That was incredible, she said. I just did some math, Elijah replied. What happens now is up to you. Later that week, the school board reached out. Roosevelt had a history of part-time educational programming guest speakers. Tutors meant the board offered Elijah an official role: mathematics, mentor, and student consultant, complete with classroom access, part-time hours, and a stipend. Elijah considered it carefully. He didn't want to stop being a janitor not because he loved cleaning, but because he loved being present. The quiet hallways, the moments between moments, the students he got to know when no one else was watching, and so, he accepted both roles. He remained janitor by morning and became mentor by afternoon. Months later, the school transformed. Students stopped measuring people by uniforms or degrees. They started asking more questions, listening more closely, being kinder. Elijah hosted afternoon math salons in the library. Not tutoring exactly, just thinking spaces, where students explored big ideas and solved complex problems together. Some even began publishing their own academic papers, with Elijah quietly guiding them. Lena won a National Student Journalism Award for her article. Colleges reached out. She chose Stanford and planned to study law and ethics. As for Carter, he was quietly transferred to another district after several complaints from students and staff. The administration offered no public explanation, but everyone knew his exit was as silent as his defeat. Final days of the school year on, the last day of school. Elijah was cleaning room 204 when he spotted something on the teacher's desk. Note. It read, "Thank you for reminding me who I want to be. Maya, class of 2025. Beneath it were 17 more handwritten letters, students from every walk of life, all expressing gratitude for more than just math, for presence, for belief, for reminding them that intelligence comes in many uniforms. Elijah stood there, quietly moved. He folded the notes, placed them carefully in his bag, and walked down the hall, his cart squeaking, his heart full. Closing. See not graduation. Principal Graham took the stage for closing remarks. We've had many visitors at Roosevelt this year, she said, but the greatest among them never knocked on our door. He just showed up every morning, quietly changing the world one hallway at a time. She gestured toward Elijah, standing near the back in his uniform. The crowd rose in applause. Students turned, clapping and cheering. Elijah smiled humbly and nodded. He didn't need a spotlight. He had already lit the way.